Philosophy conference, always at a philosophy conference, or perhaps just a poetry open mic, there's always somebody who comes up and says, you know, I'm very interested in quantum mechanics. Now, if that's you, I'm not about to get at you, so don't worry, don't get defensive on me. But you see, in one of my other lives, I'm a secondary school maths teacher, and we secondary school maths teachers are a very bitter breed. You see, you don't become a secondary school maths teacher if you're actually any good at maths. I hate to tell you that. On the contrary, there's always that point if you're a maths teacher, you haven't understood, and you know it. For me, in case you're wondering, it's further maths A level. I can teach it, but I don't like it. But the one thing I do know is that quantum mechanics is way, way, way beyond the scale of anything I can even dream of understanding. 21-dimensional calculus? Wow! That makes curl and div look like a tea party. But of course, my friend doesn't mean that. When I start to worry about the mathematics and how you define a universe where we're just epiphenomena, they're lost. And I think to myself at that point, do you know, you're not interested in quantum mechanics at all. Do you know what you are? You're a Deleuzian. And so in the interest of the free Deleuzian nation, let me try, once again, to try to convert at least half of you to why you are Deleuzians. Now, those of you who come here often will no doubt have your heart in your stomach by now, because you'll know that about once a year I try and persuade you all that Deleuze is absolutely wonderful. Deleuze is my favourite French philosopher. Threw himself out of a window in 1995, same year that Victor Chabin was assassinated, same day actually. And he is also famously difficult. So what is it he says? You may or may not remember from last year, but I'll recap. What Deleuze says is, what if the world is really like it is? What if essence is just an illusion? What if there is no such thing as identity? What if all there is tumbling difference, and differences of difference, and differences upon differences upon differences? What kind of world would we live in? Would it be worth it? At which point, every proper, serious philosopher, non-Deleuzian, stands up and says, this is nonsense, Plato proved this wrong. You can't just have differences for two reasons. Are all your differences the same? And anyway, how do you define them? Now, Deleuze takes a very strong line on the first one. He says, yep, all differences are the same. Doesn't matter whether you're brushing your teeth or being born, it's the same kind of thing. The second one, how do you define difference? He thinks it's a much more complicated question. Now, because I'm not going to use words like univocal and talk about scholasticism, I'm going to start somewhere else to give you an idea about what kind of thing this might mean. And I was at a philosophy conference last week, and it reminded me something. True great philosophy, you know, starts with personal confession. I mean it. Good philosophers are good at confessing things in strange languages. So let me confess something to you. It's kind of true. Before I was ever born, my mother took drugs. No, not those kind of drugs. It was the 60s, but she wasn't that kind of woman. No, she took a drug that I might be born. You see, the story was, my elder brother had been born and her heart had stopped. She had a fit that had been so bad they'd actually had to do a botched caesarean section to bring out my elder brother. So they were determined it wouldn't happen with me. So they gave her a drug. Epinurex, if you're counting. Now that's one of those drugs, the kind of drugs they used in the 60s, the kind of drugs that nobody had properly tested. The kind of drug that makes you so mal-coordinated you don't know where your mouth is. The kind of drug that means none of your shirts can get tucked in, that you crash into things all the time. The kind of drug that undermines identity, so you're never quite sure who you are and where you begin and where you end. The kind of drug that makes you think weird. The kind of drug that nobody knows what its effect will be on the unborn child. And now, all you good Deleuzians will go, oh, is that why the old fruitcake always has his hair asky? Why he can't seem to stand up? And why, do you notice, he always has food down his middle? All of which is true. You see, Deleuze would say you've done a synthesis there. That is a synthesis that runs if, then, a weird molecular change before you were ever born, and all of a sudden you've pulled out a life. Except Deleuze would say, but it's never that simple, is it? We all know genetics doesn't work like that. What matters then is not this will lead to that, so much as how it enters into the world, what other things it's caught up, what other little events. The same drug, then, that created my inevitable clumsiness, my weirdness of thought, also took me to university, made me teach in a way that nobody had taught quite philosophy like that, which also got me the sack, which also will lead me on and on, teaching mathematics in the weirdest way imaginable, until in the end I suspect I'll end up down in the Pyrenees in a battered old truck with a doggy on a string. It's all the same event. Each event, then, is never fixed. Rather, it lives in you like a ticking time bomb, a sequence of ands. And it did this, and it did that, and would you never believe? But finally, Deleuze will say, that kind of way of understanding, both of these are passive. They're things that happen to the event. How do you understand something utterly outside you? Something that breaks and re-breaks you, something that makes you understand yourself afresh. How? Save this, that each event breaks who you are. It makes you rethink your nature, recast it, so that you become almost a hobo in your own life. Each event you see straddles myriad universes, means you could be always different. Think yourself afresh, think yourself anew. You become then a hobo, a you, an Adam, in not a cosmos, but a chaosmos, where every event opens out onto every possible universe. A world then, that is in its way, just as difficult as quantum mechanics, that still has the idea of myriad yous in myriad worlds, but thinks it in a way that does not need to generate epiphenomena, that does not need to say you don't matter, that all that matters are strings that can only be defined in maths. A world then, that is for me far closer to who I am, and far more than that, a world that teaches me something far more precious, that in the end, in the bitter end, you are free, and free most from the necessity to be yourself. Thank you.